Buha! Buha! Yo, yo. I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. Just got back from the Target Center in chilly, freezing, I shall say, Minneapolis, where it is currently 18 degrees outside, and just walked back, and it felt appropriate given the result we just saw at the Target Center, where the Lakers were stomped 109-80. You heard that correct. A season low 80 points for the Lakers. Their fewest points in a game since January 2017. The fewest points of the LeBron era, of the AD era, and just frankly, one of the worst offensive performances I can remember in quite some time in covering a team and just in general. And this continues a troubling trend for the Lakers, where the offense has been abysmal now for most of the last 6 games. That's kind of been the stretch that they've really struggled. But it's, yeah. So we got a lot to talk about. We're going to have a quarter mark check-in. The Lakers are 21 games into the season. We're going to talk about the offense. We're going to talk about LeBron. He really struggled tonight as well. But before we get into all of that, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Okay, so 109-80. Again, the fewest points scored by the Lakers in a game since January 2017. So that is almost 8 years ago. And really, outside of D'Lo, who actually scored a season high 20 points, got the start with Austin Reeves out of the lineup, it was just absolutely brutal. Rui had 10. And he actually did so officially 4 for 5, but LeBron had 10 on 4 for 16 shooting. AD had 12 on 4 for 14 shooting. So LA's two best players combine for 22 points on 8 of 30 shooting. Not even 33% between those two. Dalton has another quiet offensive night, 6 points, 3 of 8 shooting. That's back-to-back rough games for him. And then despite garbage time starting at nearly the 8-minute mark of the fourth quarter, not one of the bench players scored more than 5 points. So this was just an all-around offensive disaster. I think that the defense was better because the offense was so bad, but the defense also wasn't good. JJ talked about them botching their post-help coverages against Julius Randle and going under against shooters that they weren't supposed to go under, leaving guys on islands in situations when they weren't supposed to be left on islands. So, I think that the defense is not going to get as much blame because the offense was so bad. But the defense certainly, had this been a more competitive game, Minnesota easily could have put up 120, 125, 130 tonight. So, just a really another disappointing loss for the Lakers. This is their during this stretch, this is now the 3rd blowout to a quality opponent, including Phoenix and Denver. And it's just, it's starting to look like this is a team that against good teams doesn't really have much of a chance. And, kind of not third straight game, but third straight time playing a quality West team that just blitzed them and ran away with the game in the second half. I mean, this one was already Minnesota was up by 12 at halftime, and it felt like they were in control more than remember, LA was up on Denver by 6 and then down to Phoenix by 2 at the half. So there's slightly different context. Like it felt like Minnesota really from honestly the first quarter, but certainly by the second quarter had control of this game. But yeah, I mean, it was just LA, their point totals by quarter, 20, 24, 20, 16, and the 16 was largely because they went, emptied the bench with about, I think it was 7:41 left in the fourth quarter. But let's get into the three takeaways from tonight's game, and then we will get into our Q&A. So takeaway number one is the offensive woes continue, and I've often focused more so on the defensive end in my post-game reactions because I felt like just looking at this team, like sure, they might have some slumps or some lulls, and like that's gonna be part of an 82 game regular season. But this has now been an extended stretch to the point where it is alarming. And I asked JJ Redick after the game, because the first couple questions were about this game specifically, and I asked him, like looking back on the past 6 games, like because the Lakers entered the game over their previous 5 games 26th in defensive rating. Then they go out and score 80 points. So they're now 28th over their past 6 games, including tonight's game. And I just asked JJ, like, what have you seen during that stretch that can explain this level of offense? Or maybe what have you not seen that can explain that? And for him, he said he's not seen them executing and just playing the same way that they played earlier in the season. He attributes it to the second half of the Denver game. He feels like that was a turning point for this group. And what was interesting with that was after that game, he pushed against the narrative and the notion that this was the Lakers' past with Denver catching up to them, right? And that he was like, we're not being haunted by the ghosts of the past, and this was just a one-off. This was an aberration. And tonight he changed his tune and he owned it. He was like, I told the group I felt it was an aberration. I told you guys, the media, I felt it was an aberration, and maybe it's not an aberration. Like maybe this is like this is becoming a troubling trend, and it's something that we have to address. So he said that tomorrow, Tuesday, as the Lakers are in Miami, that they're going to fly there tonight. He said that he's going to spend all day with his coaching staff reviewing film and data and strategy and going over everything with the offense and trying to figure out how they can fix this. Because again, so like the one thing this group could lean on through the first, I guess the 21 game mark. So the first 15 games, they could lean on being an elite offense. And they're still a top 10 offense on the season. They're 9th in offensive rating. But this was a group that when we talked about their potential, we were baking in them being a top 5, if not a top 3 offense, and them being a bottom 3 offense over this stretch and actually being 20th in defensive rating, which is still not good. It's an improvement on earlier in the season, but you factor in 28th in offense, 20th in defense. That's a bottom 10 team, right? Like that's one of the worst teams in the league, and it's a 6-game stretch. It's a drop in the bucket in the context of an 82 game season. But at the same time, the Lakers are coming off a stretch against a bunch of cupcake teams, a bunch of either good teams without their best players or bad teams. And they were barely getting by in some of those games. In some of them, they did have some blowout wins. But I think that was kind of masking some of the flaws with this group that have now been exposed over this 6-game stretch. And it's kind of been wild that the defense has somehow been better than the offense, but that's what we're dealing with here. And of course, like I mentioned this after the Utah game, and I do want to make sure I acknowledge it. Like this was a second night of a back-to-back. Minnesota had not played since Friday. And in my opinion, this was sort of a schedule loss, but the only thing I'll push back on my own counterpoint is I think these are a lot of the same issues the Lakers have been having. So while certainly maybe the legs weren't quite there with the jumper tonight for certain guys, or in terms of getting back in transition or getting out in transition or defensive rotations, like maybe they were a bit fatigued. The legs were a little heavy. I'm certainly not like ruling that out by any means, but a lot of the problems that they had tonight were similar problems that they've had the last few games. So I do think even taking this game out of it, they were amid a difficult stretch. Like I said last night, they escaped against the Jazz, and the Jazz are the worst team in the West, but bottom 3 team in the league. And LA was a botched timeout away from potentially losing that game. So, and they were shorthanded last night. They got, so some context with the lineup. They got back D'Lo, they got back Cam. JHS went out with a groin injury. It's a groin injury he's been dealing with on and off for several weeks now. Austin was still out, and they were still, of course, without Jackson Hayes, Christian Wood, and Jared Vanderbilt. So shorthanded on the interior. This is one of the toughest teams in the league to be shorthanded with your front line against because of their size. And JJ mentioned, and I agree with it, that like the Lakers have been playing some bigger teams lately between Denver, Orlando, Utah, and Minnesota. Like those are 4 of maybe the 6 or 7 biggest teams in the league. With like, he was like, Utah basically starts 3 7-footers. Denver's obviously, Jokic is the hardest player to match up with in the league. Orlando's one of the best defensive teams in the league, has size and athleticism at every position. And then tonight, Minnesota's, they've been struggling, but they are 13-2 against the Lakers in their last 15 games at home. And Anthony, like the crazy thing too is Anthony Edwards scored 8 points. He was 3 for 13, and the Lakers still lost by 30. Like that's crazy, right? So I would say there's certainly some things that can explain maybe why they lost so convincingly. And again, the second night of it back-to-back, D'Lo and Cam coming off illness, even though D'Lo had one of his best games of the season. Declined to speak to the media after the game, which I thought was interesting. I'm not quite sure what's like that. This is now multiple times, and previously he was declining after bad games, and obviously it was a bad game from a team perspective, but this was a season high in points for D'Lo. But so outside of D'Lo, everyone really struggled offensively, and then even him, he had 16 in the first half, only had 4 in the second half, so had a bit of a quiet second half, but. I mean, the offense, I think this is something we've seen from this group, specifically this group, but also just LeBron and AD led offenses, is they can be stagnant at times. They can turn into my turn, your turn. They can turn into too much iso ball, too much standing around, too much let's try and force certain things, but I don't know. It's weird because I think like we've seen a little bit of that. They've certainly gone away from AD more than they did earlier in the season. He was featured more, and it feels like a lot of times it's been him like picking and popping or him isoing, and he's been used more as like a finisher and more as a scorer recently than like that hub that everything is sort of functioning around, and certainly. I think the ATOs have not been as executed or executed as well. It felt like nearly every time the Lakers ran an ATO earlier in the season, they either scored or got like a really good look. It was a really crisp set with some intricate wrinkle and some screen to get Dalton open or some back cut or whatever. And they'll still occasionally get some of that in this stretch, but like it's not been at the same level that it was earlier in the season. So overall, like I think AD talked about spacing and him feeling like guys have not been on the same page with that. Guys are clogging each other's spacing, and JJ thinks it's ball and body movement. I think he kind of danced, like I'm going to touch on LeBron in a second, but he kind of danced around the LeBron question and sort of said it had to do with Minnesota's size. And if you're stagnant against that, then you're going to have an off night. So I think there was like JJ, I think has been kind of hinting at LeBron and some of the ISO ball or some of the bully ball that LeBron can tend to play. And he did a bit in the Utah game in terms of spamming the 2-man game with whoever Keontae George was defending, or like picking on certain defenders. And we've seen LeBron has done it for 20 plus years and done it at a very high level and has had a lot of success with that. But amid this slump that he's been in, it just hasn't been working as effectively. You saw the Lakers scored 4 points in the final 4 minutes of the Utah game, nearly tricked it away. And yeah, I mean, I think they really miss Austin tonight and last night in Utah, just because the bench is giving them absolutely nothing. Between, like, Max has had some better games offensively. Gabe had a breakout game with 10 against Utah, but he came back down to earth a bit tonight. Cam was 0 for 1, 2 points. So, like, they're not getting enough. Like, they have reasonable offensive depth, but when you take away in Austin, like, it does get a little shaky, especially when LeBron and AD are struggling, Dalton's struggling. And again, it was really just Rui and D'Lo were the only guys who had, like, efficient nights within the starting lineup. So I think adding another scorer in Austin will certainly help. And again, Rui was out for part of this stretch, or he came back for the Denver game, but he was out the Orlando game. D'Lo missed a game. Austin's now missed a couple games. So, like, Jackson came back, then he got injured again. So they have had some instability within the rotation, but I want to dig more into the film and kind of really think through what I think they need to do. But certainly I like, they're not running the same caliber of sets, that they're not running the sets as frequently. And I think this shift into LeBron having the ball in his hands more has not really worked out for anybody. Like, LeBron has struggled. D'Lo was originally struggling. He's been playing better the last few games. I think Austin initially looked better, and then he's been struggling a bit more. So Dalton, like, the lineups with Dalton in the starting lineup have actually not really been that good. If you look at the lineup data, relatively small sample size, but still, you kind of expect those lineups to have done better with the way Dalton was playing. So they got to figure this out. That there's a lot to figure out right now, but shockingly, it's the offense, the thing that was carrying this group for the first 15 plus, 15-ish games. It's the offense and not the defense, although the defense has still been bad. Second takeaway for me from tonight is LeBron is in a prolonged slump. So if you go, I would say it's the 6 games, but the turnovers have been going on double-digit games now. But tonight, he barely gets to his double-digit streak. It was certainly in danger. I think if that streak were not a thing, he probably gets pulled out earlier in the fourth, or like, because they pushed it to 20 very early in the fourth, and it was clear the game was over. LeBron, I think AD checks back in. LeBron was still in, and then he eventually got to 10. But, he was a team worst minus 28 in his 31 minutes. So 10 points, 4-16 shooting, 0 for 4 on threes. LeBron has missed 19 straight threes. That's an insane slump for him. Like, before this recent stretch, LeBron was shooting a career high on threes at just over 41%. Now he's dipped back, under 40%. 2 for 4 at the free throw line, and 8 rebounds, only 4 assists, 6 turnovers. So, that's almost not double the amount of turnovers as assists, but, like, anytime you have more turnovers than assists, it's not a good sign. And partly that was guys, some of it was guys bobbling passes or not making shots, but, like, this has been a trend for LeBron. So over this stretch, just under 22 points, about 7 rebounds, just under 9 assists, but 5 turnovers a game. Team worst minus 91 in his minutes, and he's 3 for 30 on threes, 10% on threes, and shooting 39.8% overall. So I'm sure I've not really seen this. Okay. I'm seeing you guys on the chat. All right. Sorry. I tried to focus on my takeaways first. I did remove the person who is spamming the chat, and hopefully the chat is better now. So back to LeBron. I know I have not I've not gone through the chat. Clearly, I'm gonna guess that there was some stuff. I mean, there's probably been a lot being said right now about LeBron. I don't want to overreact. I that's like kind of, if you guys have been following me for a bit, that's kind of my MO is I really try to not overreact to one game, a few games. I try to like my thing is I try to remain as like big picture as possible. And for LeBron, he's had some really high highs this year. And like, I don't think we should gloss over that when we're talking about this slump. Like, this is not how he's played all season. And he's had slumps or rough stretches in the past. He tends to start seasons slower. If you look at his monthly splits, LeBron, and he's talked about it, he views the season as a marathon and he progressively ramps up during the course of the season. So I don't want to overreact. So people are going to say, trade LeBron. I've seen like, give him a break, cut his minutes. Like, I think all that stuff is ludicrous. But what I will say is, I think what's clear now is the lows of LeBron are lower than they've ever been. And oh man, what? Okay, I see. I apologize for the madness in the chat. That's completely inappropriate, and I'm sorry. It's unfortunate, but okay. So, as Lazy One says here, in LeBron's words, you like to stay even keeled. Yes, and so, but so try to get back to my point. But with LeBron, I think the lows are lower than they've ever been, which I think is to be expected in year 22, about to be age 40. The highs are not quite as high as obviously like Cleveland or Miami LeBron, or even earlier in his LA tenure, but they're still pretty high. Like the peak version of LeBron, in my opinion, is still a top 10 guy in the league and capable of being a top 5 guy and even like the best player in like going up against most of the top guys in the league. I think there's like Jokic, maybe peak Giannis, Shea, Luka. Like, there's a few guys who I think their peak version is still going to be higher than peak LeBron. But LeBron's high, peak is still very high. It's just he's not getting there as consistently, right? So I think that's certainly something that the Lakers have to factor in as they look toward the future of the season. And I think that the other thing that to me kind of ties into the offense is like, it's almost felt like there's been a bit of a push-pull recently between what JJ envisions as the offense and the ball movement and a more egalitarian style of offense where everyone's touching it, everyone's moving, and you're still focusing the offense on 4 to 6 guys. It's still going to primarily be LeBron, AD, Austin, D'Lo, Dalton, Rui, and then maybe another role player pops off on any given night. But kind of focusing on those 6, and there will be nights like really LeBron and AD are the top 2 guys, and then the other 4 I think can kind of fluctuate between who's the number 3, who's the number 6, and anything in between. But it has felt like with the shift to the new starting lineup and LeBron kind of playing more point guard, they've gone back to some of the older style of offense that they've previously ran, and I just don't think it's worked. So I think the one thing, if I'm JJ and the coaching staff, is I do need to go back and point out some of these possessions and point out the way that they've been running the offense more recently and kind of just highlight, like, this has not been working. And if you look at the offense that we were running earlier in the season compared to the offense that we're running now with you more at the reins in your preferred style, it just has not worked. And when you were more the peak version of yourself, it could work. Like, you basically needed to put like 4 decent guys around LeBron and he could make it work. He could figure it out. That has not been the case. And then you factor in the turnovers and the shot selection often leading to transition opportunities for the opponent, and LeBron not exactly getting back in transition. Like, Man, this is the spammers are out in full force tonight. Uh like LeBron not getting back in transition, I just think that that compounds it even further. So it's like it's like on the one hand, he's hurting the Lakers offensively with the turnovers, with the shot selection, the step back threes when his shots just not falling, some of the contested shots. But then he's also not getting back in transition. So that's my point is like I think bigger picture, LeBron's going to be fine. The Lakers are going to be fine. They're still going to be a good offense. I think this is still going to be a top 10 offense. Maybe the ceiling is a little bit lower. Maybe it's the eighth or ninth best offense versus like the third or fourth best offense. That does matter for this group for sure. But I think LeBron will be fine. Again, if this continues for another 5-6 games, another 3 weeks, then we're having a different conversation about the Lakers ceiling, about LeBron, about his status and like his future and whatever. But I don't think we're there yet. I think anyone having that conversation, it's premature. But I'll just say, like, I think the lows are clearly lower than they've ever been. Like tonight, he's trying to get to double digits and he's trying to break out of this slump. And his fourth and final 3-point attempt is an air ball that's sail like wide open. If you go back, I'm actually writing about it for The Athletic, but like if you go back, sails like a few feet left and not even close. And it's just we've and again, maybe back to back, he's about to be 40. Like there are some legitimate excuses for LeBron, but you know, it's yeah. So okay, and then I'm just making sure nothing else is going on in the chat right now. Okay. Third and final takeaway. And I apologize for this kind of going off the rails here. I obviously don't have control over these spammers, but it's pretty annoying. Okay. Third and final takeaway is quarter mark check-in. So quarter mark, Lakers are 21 games into the season, about 25% or so. They are 12-9, 8th in the West, 9th in offense, 24th in defense, 20th in net rating. They are 5-8 against teams below 500 and 7-1 against teams above 500. And I asked JJ pregame about the quarter mark of the season. He said the team he feels is uneven and inconsistent. AD was asked about those comments, and he said some nights we look like a team that could beat anybody. Some nights we look like a team that could be beaten by anybody and is going to do nothing this season. I thought that was kind of a wild statement from AD, but I agree. And then LeBron, what was a bit more measured, said that basically it is what it is. Like this was kind of to be expected that we'd get off to a slowish start with new coaching staff, new rotation, new starting lineup, and new system. But like, he was like, I'm not going to accept our record or how we're playing, but like, you know, it's kind of, again, he said it is what it is. So I thought AD had probably the best. Like, I think JJ's was a little on the more pessimistic side with the uneven and inconsistent. Like that's true, but I don't know. I mean maybe that's the most accurate or description for it. I think AD's is kind of what I've been saying, which is to me this is a team that on any given night can technically beat anybody or hang with anybody, but at the same time they can be beaten. Like how many close wins do they have against bad teams, right? Like they have so many single digit wins against like lottery teams. And now they've had several blowouts recently against like good teams, and it's trending in the wrong direction. I think like Miami and Atlanta, they should at least split that, if not go 2-0, but we'll see what happens with Austin. We'll see. Do they get, I mean, Jackson's going to be out for a bit. They're kind of at a tough spot in terms of that frontline depth, but the schedule is going to ease up a bit to close the month. I just, you just gotta, if you're the Lakers, you gotta hope that this doesn't spiral, and you gotta really try to prevent this from spiraling, where in the West, every game matters. You want to stack wins, and getting into too much of a hole. Like already they've been in the top 4 in the West for most of the season. They slip to 5, they slip to 6, now they slip to 8. Like if they're not careful, they're going to find themselves in that 9, 10, 11 mix. And that's where you don't want to be because you're not going to go anywhere. And that's also not going to incentivize the organization and the front office to make a move, to make a trade or a couple trades, because they probably need to make a couple. So I'm going to have an episode tomorrow, Buha's block, on going through 10 storylines from these last technically 11 games, but it was supposed to be 10 and 10. It's just they had the back-to-back. And I'm going to dive into more stuff at the quarter mark of the season, but just wanted to kind of hit on sort of the biometrics of the Lakers in terms of 12 and 9, 8th in the West, 9th offensively, 24th defensively, 20th net rating, and 5 and 8 against teams above 500. Sorry, I think I misspoke and said below earlier. And then 7 and 1 against teams below 500. So they've not fared well for the most part against good teams this season. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. And oh man, another one. Okay. Did not mean to put that up there. Okay. The spammers are out. Who, I don't know how to put someone in charge of the chat mod, but that is something I obviously have to do. I guess I'm just going to keep banning people. But let's get into the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring the chat now, and I will be banning people. But first one from first super chat from Angelco Azorad Rezo. Thank you for the super chat. LeBron at 40 and AD should focus on post-ups while D'Lo runs pick and roll. They need to play in the paint, draw fouls, and use the triangle offense. LeBron should avoid the three-point line and dominate inside with smarter ball movement. I'm with you. Like I think D'Lo has played much better. And one thing, like I hope you guys have seen with certain, like, I'm willing to change my opinion. And I thought earlier in the season, D'Lo was not playing well, and I supported the bench move, and he's been playing better. And maybe at some point that turns into a conversation about what the starting lineup should be, or what certain roles should be, what that should look like. So with D'Lo, with Cam, like even with Gabe and like Max, I was higher on those guys, then I decreased in confidence. Now with Max, I think he's been playing better, so it's kind of affirmed what I previously thought. With D'Lo, I thought he's had some pretty rough stretches, especially defensively, but also had that stretch of single-digit games. Has not been shooting well overall in the season, but shooting better the last like 3-4 games. And then Cam, I think, is actually struggling and is starting to maybe move to the bench, and then is starting to play less and less. Feels like Gabe and Max have surpassed him again. But I'm very flexible in terms of like trying to read like what's going on with the team and who's performing well and who's not. So I think the offenses look really good with D'Lo out there. I think LeBron, I don't think he should avoid the 3-point line, but I do think he needs to probably be more selective. I think some of the step back, like contested ones, he could do to avoid. And I think exploiting LeBron and AD mismatches, but being more intentional and not as like ISO post up heavy, and just a lack of movement around those guys. I think it also helps when guys are making shots, and like Dalton hasn't made shots the last couple of games. Austin's been out, so they haven't had the normal firepower. And then next one from Justin Tyndall. We need players that want to defend. This is a big thing, and I've talked about it before, but I did the Nate Duncan Dunked On podcast season preview before the season, and he asked me how many guys play with a high motor on this team, and it was kind of a struggle to come up with more than a few. I think there was a question in a previous stream probably a couple weeks ago asking about like how many dogs are on this team, and to me, I think of a dog. I mean, there's different versions or different definitions, but for me, it's like that kind of Pat Bev, Dylan Brooks, like maybe those guys are extreme versions of it, but like guys who are gonna, like, I'll always remember Austin takes that cheap shot for like Pat Bev was objectively awful for the Lakers, but Austin gets that cheap shot. I think it was from DeAndre Ayton, and Pat immediately goes and shoves him in the back. And like, I really don't know if the Lakers have any players that would like maybe Vando, maybe Cam, honestly, maybe Armel Traore. I like he was a bright spot tonight. It ended up like 15 minutes. I thought gave the Lakers some really good minutes, but like I think they need more of those types of guys that play hard, play defense, and want to do the little things. And like Gabe does the little things. I don't think necessarily he's like an instigator, but I think they could use kind of more of that like energy. Uh, Nick T, I appreciate the super chat, but I'm not going to touch on that situation. That I've stayed out of that. Diego Cardona, do you find yourself being more attached to players that the Lakers draft, or does it not matter to you? I can honestly say that I don't want to see D'Lo go simply because he's homegrown. So I know this is an opinion for a lot of people, a lot of Laker fans. For me, I have no attachment to, I've said like since I become a reporter, I'm no longer a fan, and I might be a fan of like a particular player, but even that I try to separate from my analysis. As far as like of course, if you're the Lakers, if you're a fan, if you're within the organization, you're gonna have a certain attachment to guys you draft. Like they have a certain attachment to Austin Reeves for discovering him, or for drafting Max Christie, or I think the D'Lo attachment isn't quite there because that was a previous regime and not this one. But like Dalton isn't the new guy that they have this affinity towards and a special attachment. So there's certainly an element of that. For me, I understand the fan perspective of if you want to see a guy grow, and D'Lo has this like redemptive arc with the Lakers where he left and he became an all-star and then bounced around a bit, and then he came back, and like I get why fans would be attached to him or want to support him or whatever. So if that's your MO, I support that. But I personally believe in like a more cold, calculated approach to your team, and it's just like who are the best players and what's the best way to run and manage the team to like give you the best shot to win a championship. So whether that's a homegrown guy or like there's no player like, or let me rephrase that. There are players that I would, if I'm the Lakers, I would give up Austin Reeves for. There are players that I would give up Dalton Connect for. There are players that I would give up Max Christie for. Like no player should be untouchable in this team outside of probably LeBron and AD. But even then, like if Denver's willing to trade Jokic, are you really not going to give up either? Like there's always a player that you, in my opinion, there's always scenarios in which you should be willing to give up players. Now, obviously it's going to be different depending on the player, and some guys are more valuable, some guys aren't. But to me, I'm not attached to anybody. You can't see this. I don't think a trade would make a difference. Thank you for the super chat. You might be right. And that's kind of the unfortunate thing. That's why personally, like all summer, I was saying my fear if I'm a Laker fan, or just my fear if I'm the team, if I'm like, because LeBron and AD wanted them to make moves and they didn't. And it's like the disaster scenario was the team underachieves or just isn't that good. And then they stand pat. And that was, if you address those things over the summer and at least made one, maybe you just move one pick, not both. You're at least coming in with some new juice. Maybe you addressed ideally like a better wing player. And I think, I'm not saying that like maybe this team is still, 13-8, 14-7 and nothing like crazy, but I do think having some new blood in there and potentially having a better like two-way wing would have made a difference to start the season, because they're really just lacking in two-way players right now. And the pendulum has swung where at first it was didn't have enough defensive guys. Now it's kind of been the offensive guys have been struggling, and they've leaned more on the defensive guys, and that's why the defense has been better. But then the offense has taken a hit. Like you're seeing lineups out there with Max, Gabe, and Cam, and it's like you're going to stop people, but you're not really going to score if those are three of your five. And it's like those guys in Rui and AD, you're just not going to score much because everyone's going to load up on AD, and the other four guys, like Rui's been inconsistent with his shooting, although overall he shot well on threes. But the other three guys like aren't going to draw much defensive attention, and they've not shot it well enough to really make defenses pay. So I think a trade could still make a difference, but they are running out of time if they really are going to wait until January, February, which seems to be the case, but they are running out of time if this goes off the rails. Super chat from Eeg. Max needs a team where his mistakes won't be punished. Little feel on court, no vision, telegraphs passes, talented but tough situation to develop in. I agree. Like, I think this is a tough situation to be Max and be trying to develop. And this is where I've mentioned it before. I think the sins of Darvin Ham have come back to haunt the Lakers and Max Christie. I think Max Christie should have been playing last year over like the version of Cam that was back later in the season. I don't think was very good. Spencer Dinwiddie had his struggles. Gabe Vincent had his struggles. And it was sort of like, Cam was a guy Darvin relied on earlier in the season. He had an affinity for him. He was a clutch guy. LeBron and AD liked him. So he got the, playing time over Max. Spencer was a guy they signed around the buyout market. He got the preferential treatment. Gabe was their offensive, the offseason addition. So he got a certain role. Then, so it was just all that stuff kind of added up. And it was like, well, this is a dude who has shown some flashes throughout the season. The Knicks game, the Cavs game. I think he was good in the Boston game. Like he had shown some flashes, and it's like, this dude's 21. He's about to be a restricted free agent. Like, develop him. Let's see what you got with him. And I think you could have had some of the same growing pains he's had now last year in a more stable role. And then this year kind of be just a better player. So it is tough to develop. And I think, frankly, we've Dalton's been better than Max, obviously, but like we've seen it with Dalton. I think Dalton, I know some people were upset with me kind of criticizing him last night, but like he wasn't as harmful tonight and wasn't as bad defensively, but still didn't have a good game, didn't really make an impact out there, didn't even have the rebounding to fall back on. And that's okay because Dalton's a rookie. Yes, he's 23, he's a little bit older than Max, but like you're going to have some growing pains with young guys. That's just how it goes. But it is tough though. Like to your point, I think ideally Max is probably in a rebuilding situation and kind of growing. And that's where if they ultimately need to go in a different direction and he's a piece that they end up moving, like previously I probably would have had more of an issue with it, but now I kind of think he might need to grow in a different situation ultimately. But I do think he's been playing better, and I think they should try to keep him if they can. I'm still high on Max. To your point, like it's just hard to develop younger guys when you're trying to compete. Like those two things often don't go hand in hand. All right, I'm returning to the chat. I hope the spam has not returned. It's looking like it is not, so that's good. Redonkulous, thank you for the super chat. I don't see a question, but I appreciate you. Okay. Jay says Max needs to put on 10 to 15 pounds. He's honestly a bit too skinny. Yeah, the one thing with Max defensively, I think he's a very good technical defender. He's got good footwork. He's got good. One of the things that always impresses me with Max is the hands. He always has high hands and is able to track the ball and contest shots well. But what the scouting report on Max, if I'm an opposing team, is if you bump him in the post, or if you're posting him up or isoing him, and you could turn and back him down and bump him, the second he takes that initial bump, he has a tough time absorbing that, and you could just rise up. So you've seen a lot of guys will post him up in like the mid-range area and back him down or whatever, and that first or second shoulder bump, Max takes it, and all of a sudden he's kind of stunned there for a second or a half second, and you could rise up and shoot over him. Like I think Devin Booker has done that to him, but some of these bigger guard / wings are capable of doing that. Android Andreas, Max can move laterally very well. Yes, I think Max is a good defender. I think it's just there are certain matchups that are tough for him, like the bigger, more physical guards and wings. But in terms of, I like him on point guards. I think he's good at navigating screens on and off the ball. He was doing that thing earlier in the season where he was kind of like trying to spin out of an off-ball screen, and sometimes that didn't go well. But I think he's cleaned that up a bit, and I think Max is good. You guys don't need to sell me on Max. Like I had him on my podcast. I called the deal a steal when the Lakers signed him. Like I I'm high. I thought to start the season there was a chance like he could push to be in the starting conversation. Like really what the Lakers ultimately did with Cam, I thought they were eventually going to do with Max once they realized that that D'Lo and Austin weren't gonna fit in the backcourt. So Max, I'm still high on Max. I just also I'm trying to realize some of the limitations there and also look at like what the Lakers need. And I think he could still be an effective rotation player within this group. I just also think he ideally needs like time to develop and reps to develop. And it's hard to do that on the fly when every possession matters. And you'll still see he'll make mistakes of ball handling, decision making, turnovers, attacking closeouts. Like he's gotten better since the beginning of the season, but he's still not quite where he needs to be. But he'll get better for sure. L.A. Jovan, you think it's important for them to get a 20-plus point per game scorer like Levine, BI, or Trae Young now to ease the load on Bron and AD? Should LeBron sit one game in back-to-backs? I like this question because one thing that JJ, LeBron, and AD all touched on is that the defense was so bad to start the season that they feel like they've overcorrected in terms of emphasizing the defensive end and really focusing on it with game plan and with film and with strategic adjustments, that the offense has been what has slipped and what has taken a back seat in terms of the focus of the coaching staff and film work and all that stuff. So I think now that's going to probably flip, and you're going to see the offense become the thing that they emphasize. And again, I said it earlier, like I think they're going to be fine offensively. I think this is going to be a top 10 offense, if not top 5. Maybe the high end ceiling isn't quite where it looked like it could be earlier in the year, but especially because I think Vando is going to come back and help the defense. He's going to hurt the offense. Christian Wood could theoretically help both, but I said, a couple streams ago, I think like I have more confidence in Vando coming back sooner than Christian Wood. I don't feel great about that, but it does seem like there's a more concrete timeline with Wood, and it's pushed out based on what the team has said. So to answer your question, my concern with these guys, especially Levine and Trae Young, is just the defensive end. And if this is a group that's right now 24th in defense, you add Trae Young or Zach LaVine, and if it's Trae Young, you probably have to give up Austin based on what Atlanta has covered. Like Atlanta has wanted Austin in the past, and they wanted him for DeJounte Murray. I assume they would want him for Trae Young. Levine and BI, you can probably keep Austin out of those deals, but whether it's, let's say that you get Levine and you still have Austin, I've said it before, but like Levine, Dalton, and Austin is not a good defensive trio. It's a really good offensive trio. Like any one of those guys can drop 20 plus on a given night. Levine, like let's say compared to D'Lo, I don't think Levine is going to have the lows in the playoffs that D'Lo has had. Like he gives you a certain floor that, put Levine in the Denver series, he's going to get you 15 a night. Like, is he going to get 20, 25, 30? Maybe not. Maybe that's more of a game-to-game, matchup-to-matchup type situation. But you put Levine on the Lakers in the playoffs, he's going to walk into 15 points just based on his offensive skill set, the athleticism, the shooting, the off-the-bounce game. Like, Levine will be fine. The concern is the defensive end. And that's where I think a lot of the conversation trends more toward offensive guys, whether it's Levine, Ingram, although Ingram, I think, can be a productive, useful defender. It's just he needs to scale back the offensive load, which I think he would in LA. But even I mentioned Valanciunas and Vucevic last night. Like, those guys are good players and they're good scorers, and they would help the offense, but they would hurt the defense. And I think ideally the Lakers are adding more two-way guys, in my opinion. So guys who are not a minus on either side of the ball, and those guys are expensive. especially in comparison with some of the Lakers trade assets, it's going to require at least a pick. If it's two separate deals, it's probably a pick going out in each one. Maybe there's a deal where you give up both picks for a certain guy. But my hesitation, like in theory, I agree with you that if you could wave a magic wand and give them another like higher level offensive option than Austin or D'Lo or Dalton or Rui, and a clear number 3 like all-star level guy, sure, I think that's a need. But in terms of the like, I think the Lakers have several needs, and I would still say like the biggest one of all is like a true two-way guy who's between 6'7" and 6'9". I would say the second biggest need is probably that backup center / a center that could play next to AD. And then I would get into like maybe a more offensive minded perimeter like upgrade. But to me, that's like I've even thrown out like a smaller athletic guard, kind of like the Bruce Brown or the Anthony Melton. Obviously he's injured and he wasn't going to be available, but like that type of guy. So I guess for me, offense is a lower priority, even though I know right now it seems like they need a bunch of stuff offensively. I think they'll figure it out. Guys will shoot better. They'll get Austin back. The offense will be okay. I think it's the defense that continues to be the big picture trend or big picture concern for me. Just so you guys know, I'm going to go about 10 more minutes. I know I always say that, but I still have to finish writing. I have a flight in the morning going to Miami. I also need to record my Buha's block. So I am going to try and get out of here in a semi-timely manner. Super chat from Eeg. Reports today say DFS can be had for seconds. No brainer. If true, DFS plus 2 players with the first and you have a contender. Terribly fearful. Rob says no trade is worth first if this keeps up. Thank you, Jovan. I mean, if you could get DFS for a second or 2 seconds, I do that in a heartbeat. And I've often heard closer to a first, or maybe like 3 seconds or something. But if it can be had, if he could be had for a second or 2, I do that in a second if I'm the Lakers, and really like I don't see any reason to wait, and I don't see any reason not to. So I had not seen that report, but I'm taking what you're saying at face value. Like I think that's a no-brainer if that's the case. Also, I'd be interested to see like who reported that. Maybe what's like, is that coming from the Nets side? Is that coming from someone else? Maybe his side trying to get him out of there. But yeah, I think that's a no-brainer. Another super chat from Harry Chinani. Thank you, Harry. I feel bad for AD. Deserves at least one MVP / DPOY, but unlikely given Jokic's crazy stats and team's subpar defense, even though it's been better lately. Yeah, I think AD's been better defensively. He kind of started off strong, had a dip, and his come back up. And like that OKC game to me was arguably the best defensive performance of the season for him, which is saying something. But it continues to be like you're just not going to win Defensive Player of the Year unless your team is a top 10 defense for the most part. You're really not going to be considered. And it's unfortunate for AD because he has been he might go down as the greatest defender never to win Defensive Player of the Year. I forgot if Bill Russell, when they created Defensive Player of the Year, I feel like it was after Bill Russell had already, his career was over when they created it. So I don't know if like maybe technically it's Bill Russell, but in terms of the modern era, like AD is probably going to go down as the best defender never to have won one. I guess Tim Duncan is also in that conversation, and that's it off the top of my head. But it's wild that AD has never won one. And I mean, honestly, peak LeBron is in that. Like peak LeBron was maybe the most versatile defender we've ever seen, or right. I'd throw Draymond in there and peak Kawhi, peak Scottie Pippen. Like there's several guys you could throw in there, but LeBron could guard centers in a way that most wing guys can't. And I would even say like probably a way Kawhi and Scottie couldn't. Okay. Gemini, damn, traveling from LA to Minnesota to Miami to Atlanta is like a 4 seasons tour. Yeah, I'm glad I skipped Utah. although it ended up being an exciting game, I think going from Utah, like adding the Utah trip in would have been really rough today. So certainly there will be future back-to-backs that I'm on both games for, and I've done my fair share of back-to-backs, but it was nice to get here early, get settled for the game, and then be able to go live a bit earlier. Super chat from J.R. Madrano, post LeBron and even AD. Would you bet the next Lakers superstar be acquired through trade, free agency, or drafted? That's a fun question. I think that's a good mailbag question where I could like dive into it a bit more, but I will answer it. I would say I think the next Lakers superstar will be acquired through trade, which to me, because drafted, like they might be giving up some of the future picks. They already have given up some of the future picks. So certainly possible, but you have to get lucky, and you have to get a high pick. You have to draft the right guy. There's a certain amount of luck involved. Like how many, like the Pistons for years, or the Wizards, or like there's been plenty of crappy teams that have had high picks that have never landed a superstar. Now, I think the Lakers have drafted well, so I'm sure the Lakers would figure it out, but you got to get really lucky. Free agency is just not the same in terms of player movement at like the highest of levels. It's often guys take the contract with their team, get the guaranteed money, get the higher, annual salary from re-signing, and then eventually demand out. So I would say based on the way superstar movement has often, like you'll occasionally have the Paul George or other, but that was also a situation where the Clippers didn't want to give him that contract. And I think the Lakers' next superstar will probably be more of a player in their prime, and it will be a situation where that player is under contract. Honestly, probably similar to the AD situation, where I think it'll be someone who is nearing the end of their contract and has a little bit of leverage because they technically could leave and sign elsewhere, and they're just going to be like, I want to get out of here. Android, Andres, Marcus Gasol, don't forget about him. I think if you're saying best players never to win Defensive Player of the Year, Marcus Gasol did win a Defensive Player of the Year. He won over LeBron, and LeBron has not forgotten it. Dark Galaxy, do you travel with other reporters? Not like directly with them in terms of like we're booking the same itinerary, but Dave McMenamin is a fellow Delta traveler. So he's on my flight tomorrow to Miami, and he's often on a lot of the same flights as me. Sometimes some of us will stay in the same hotel kind of coincidentally, but we often don't. We might share our kind of plans loosely in terms of, hey, I'm flying in on this day at this time, or I'm staying at this hotel, but we book separately because we each book through our respective companies. So it's not, but everyone has their own airline, and Dave and I are both Delta guys. FJ Betaphile, hit the damn like button, people. Thank you. Please hit the like button if you've not done so already. Joe Wilkinson, thank you for the super chat. Fang Charlie, hey Jovan, how is the vibe in the locker room today? Do you have any and all news from the injury front? Can AR come back into the lineup? So AR is day-to-day moving forward. No updates on Vando. Quincy's still out with the ankle injury. No updates on Christian. Vibe was down, but I wouldn't say it was abnormal. I did think, as I mentioned earlier, I thought it was interesting that D'Lo declined to speak when he had a season-high 20 points. He's previously only declined to speak after bad games. So I don't know what's going on with him, but outside of that, like AD was particularly down, but I think AD gets down after, like AD often wears his emotions on his sleeve. It's funny because he's such a quiet guy, and you typically don't expect that from AD, but AD is like very transparent with how he's feeling. So I would say, but I would say it was pretty normal vibes. Like sometimes when you get your ass kicked like that, you, it's almost a little bit easier to get over. Like I think if they had lost the Utah game, they would have been a little bit more like, that would have been a really tough one where they would have looked back on like, this is a game we should have won. This is a lottery team. This is the type of game that could cost us. Like this one, they just got so decisively manhandled that I think it's a little bit easier to move on. Puppy Chow 302. How many years will it take the Lakers to get back to the finals after LeBron retires? That's a good one. That's a tough one. I mean, it's so hard to miss the finals. Or I mean, to make the finals. It's easy to miss the finals. So what if I think LeBron's going to play one more year and retire after year 23. So that would be retiring 25, 26. I'll say 5 years. I'll say Lakers are in the finals in 2031. Ken Carter, what does Rob have to do to get trades done? Take me through how these calls go. Well, I've never been on a trade call, so I can't give you like an explicit play-by-play. But I mean, generally, it's sort of like any negotiation or any bartering that you would do. Like you're gonna. I mean, typically you will call a team, kind of check in. All these front office people have relationships, so I'm sure there's some level of small talk, but then you start to kind of pry and ask about different guys, sort of ask about their general strategy, who's potentially on the trading block or who they're considering trading, sort of the guys that are off limits, and then you start getting into prices for some of these guys, and there's going to be a certain element of hardball, and teams are I've talked about. I mean, there's the Lakers tax, but there's also a desperation tax where I think everyone knows that the LeBron AD era is probably another season and a half or so, right? Like, this season and next. So teams are going to ask for a first round pick for maybe a guy who's worth like a second or two. Teams are going to ask for 2 first round picks for a guy that's worth 2 seconds or a first, right? Like, so if I'm the Nets, I'm going to ask the Lakers, hey, for Dorian Finney-Smith, give me 2 firsts. And of course, LA isn't going to do that. But like that's just how you negotiate, and then eventually you figure out a price that works for both sides. So the one kind of factor that I've talked about a lot is like teams aren't often looking to make trades right now. And there are guys who can't be traded till December 15th, like a Jonas Valanciunas. There are players who can't be traded till January 15th. So that affects the trade market, and that's, you'll start to see some trades. There'll probably be a trade or two like between December 15th and January 1st. Then there might be another trade or two between like January 1st and January 15th. Then in the final like 3 weeks leading into the trade deadline, that's when you'll start to see like most of the action, and there'll probably be double-digit leads. Joe Wilkinson, I think you had submitted a super chat, so I appreciate you. Hey, Jovan, big fan. I listen all the time. My question is about AD. Have you noticed anything suggesting AD is hurt, or is there another explanation for his play lately? He seems hurt to me. Yes, AD is hurt. And that's another thing with the AD conversation. Like that's partly why I haven't been as critical of AD, even though he has had some offensive struggles lately. He's certainly been a part. Like LeBron has been the face of it because of the turnovers, because of the 3-point missing streak, but AD is dealing with the plantar fasciitis in his left foot. He's clearly been lumbering up and down the floor. He did tweak his knee last night in Utah, and that you saw it for stretches of the fourth quarter. He was also kind of limping and lumbering. So AD's playing, like, I give AD props. He's played through a lot. Plantar fasciitis is something that you can play through, but it's painful, and there's a lot of treatment needed, and the best thing for it is really rest and staying off of it. And AD's obviously playing through it. So, yeah, I mean, AD's not healthy. And that's kind of another thing that's like unfortunate, is just, especially with the front line being so decimated, AD has continually had to play heavy minutes. And, there's no real answer in sight until Vando and Christian get healthy, and you can, or the Lakers can limit AD a bit. Jalen Farrell, you wrote a piece about AR leaving after LeBron season is at 55%. Can you talk a little bit more about it? So I didn't write this, and this got aggregated. And the crazy thing was they said I said 375 million for Austin, which like if I had said that, which I did not, I would need to be drug tested. I did not say that. I said 3 years, 75 million. So that's about 25 million a year. I guess you could bump that up to 100, but that was the price that Austin was going to be getting if he hit the open market uh, in restricted free agency. If he could have hit the open market like that was something that San Antonio was considering offering him, but they ultimately didn't. He re-signed on the 4-year, 53, 56 million. And I think Austin is going to get around mid 20s in his next deal. Now, so what I said was because there's so much up in the air with what the Lakers could look like then, I think it's close to 50-50 that Austin stays. But if I had to pick, I think there's a chance that like maybe a team, sometimes you see, maybe a team throws a bag at him that the Lakers aren't. Maybe it's like 30 million a year, or 32 million a year, or whatever, and they slightly overpay him or pay him more than the Lakers are comfortable with. And because your value is ultimately what teams are willing to pay you. And I honestly don't think that's crazy for Austin, but I know some people will. But so I think there's a chance that potentially, depending on the direction the Lakers go, Austin is no longer a Laker just by if the Lakers are rebuilding, or like maybe they tear it down. Maybe they say we want to trade AD, we want to collect as many draft picks, young guys as possible, and like Austin is now in his prime, age wise, and we're not willing to pay whatever the price that Team X is willing to pay him. So that's why I said 55%. I think it's still close. I would not be surprised if Austin is a Laker after the next deal, but I also just know how this works. And given the uncertainty of like what the Lakers look like 2 seasons from now, I just think there's a chance that potentially Austin is gone. New Age Live, what's your favorite city to travel on work? New York. My brother lives out there. I love New York. It's probably my second favorite city behind LA. But the sleeper city is Toronto. That's where I had my bachelor party. It's one of my favorite cities. Love going there. Fang Charlie, thank you for the super chat. Sup, Jovan. Okay, wait. I think I already answered this one. But what's up, Fang Charlie? Okay. I've gone a little bit over. Surprise, surprise. Oh no, there's another spammer. Nice. Okay. Person's gone. I think. Okay. Jay, has it already been 2.5 hours? Not yet, but not yet. I'm not doing it tonight, unfortunately, because I still got to write. I got to wake up, go to Miami. Ernesto Madrigal Rodriguez, any tips on a young journalist building sources? This one is a tricky one to kind of explain in like a minute or two, but I will do my best. I would say the most important thing with building sources is trust, and that is not built in one day. That's not built in one conversation, and it's something that you build over time. And I think genuinely building a relationship, I mean, you could say friendship. It's a little bit tricky depending on who it is, because I think as a journalist, if a reporter, whatever, you have to keep a certain distance where like there's going to be times you have to report on something that might upset a source potentially. And, that like there's always going to be that potential friction with the relationship and with the dynamic. But hopefully if you've built up a good enough rapport, a good enough relationship, a good enough trust there, they understand that you're just doing your job. And even if you're writing something potentially critical of them or critical of their interests, that they trust you and understand that it's not coming from a malicious place or an intentional place. It's coming from these are the facts. This is the reporting I have. Ideally, they can maybe give you their side, and you factor that into your reporting and try to make sure you're telling both sides of whatever you're working on. But I would say the the one thing you don't want to do is like you don't want to burn sources, and you don't like you want to make sure that anything you're reporting you have the permission to report, and you have it's not going to trace back, like clearly trace back to. So I've been asked about my first big Clippers story, and that I reported when I used to cover the Clippers, and that was a big thing on like their team chemistry and some of the internal dynamics. And there were several anecdotes in that story that either I couldn't get a second source for, so I couldn't report it, or even if I did get a second source and was able to share that piece of intel and be like, hey, have you heard this? Can you confirm this? You know, whatever, with someone else, the intel was so sensitive that it was clearly going to implicate or indicate that I had gotten it from person X. And that, as like, you never, like, people will go to court to protect their sources, and like with sports it's typically not that serious unless you're dealing with like a lawsuit or a big legal situation. But I would just say like that is, I think, an important lesson with sourcing and building it and keeping it, is like I think there could be that the enticement to get a piece of information and then blast it and like get your name out there, get aggregated, get some attention. But if that's going to burn, I mean, that's how you shouldn't operate in general. But if that is going to burn the source and make it clear where you got it from, it's just not worth it. Like, sourcing and credibility and having trust with the people you're working with, and having trust with your sources is of the utmost importance in our business. And I think there's a lot of people who just throw stuff out, or just want to get their name or clicks out there. And I think you got to be really careful with that. And that's maybe a conversation for a different, maybe I could do an episode on my career and get into some more journalistic stuff. But for now, I'll say, yeah. Oh man, we got another one. How many accounts does this person have? L.A. Good sources equals hard to find but easy to lose. Yes. Bruce, great work, man. Awesome to see you care about small things like trolling in chat, especially because it's Lakers and LeBron. Well, thank you. I did not realize the total here, Bruce. That is amazing. Thank you so much. I think this is the super chat record. I really appreciate you. And yeah, I care about this community. I care about all of you. Late Night Gang. I know I haven't said it the last few streams, but this is the Late Night Gang. It's 12:40 a.m. here in I don't even know where I am anymore. Here in Minneapolis, and I guess so. It's what, 10:41 in Pacific, 1:41 Eastern, and then I know plenty of you are overseas in other countries, and it's morning. It's the previous day. It's the next day. So I appreciate you all for rocking with me. And Bruce or Justine Severo says Bruce is the chat goat. Yes, he is. Okay. Jay is $49.99 a record. Yes. Okay. I hope there are no more spammers. But for that, I'll go an extra 5, and ultimately we'll go 20 over. Bruce, if you got a question, man, let me know. I would love to answer it. Eeg, thank you for the super chat. LAL parade bigger / same / smaller than LAD. So we're saying like a hypothetical parade. I think at this point, I mean, I know LA was really rocking with the Dodgers. I think Well, I think if LeBron brought the Lakers another title, LeBron and AD, uh, and it was their second title together. It was the franchise's 18th title, tying them with Boston. Yes, the Minneapolis titles count, and I can say that because I'm in Minneapolis. So, uh, um, I mean, I think that LA would go wild for another Lakers title, especially because the last one came in 2020 and they weren't able to properly celebrate it. So it does feel like the Dodgers have a little bit more juice compared to the Lakers right now. Obviously, they've won World Series more recently and I think just been better than the Lakers. So maybe there's some recency bias with that, but it does feel like you see a little bit more like a Dodger hat is easier to wear than like a Lakers jersey, just in terms of like your everyday stuff. So you always see Dodger hats all over LA and frankly all over the country as I travel everywhere. But uh, yeah, that would be interesting. I don't. I think if they did a 2020 celebration, I think it would be big. I don't think it would be quite as big, maybe as the most recent Dodger parade. But I think if they won another, like if they won this year somehow, I think that the city would go wild. Sean Parker, Jovan, do you think AD will leave when Brown retires? I think AD probably stays because I think at that point he's established roots, and as long as the Lakers are willing to pay him, which obviously they were, giving him his most recent contract, like I think he probably stays. I do wonder how AD ages, just because of the really the injuries. Man, we got another one. Racism is just come on. That's uncalled for, inappropriate, and you will be banned. Uh, sorry, y'all. I don't know what. Yeah, I'm kind of speechless with just. It's not just the spamming. It's like what is being spammed. It's yeah. I apologize, even though obviously I yeah. That's okay. Uh, as far as AD and Braun, I okay, I see Fang Charlie. I'll get to you in a second. 80 after Braun leaves, I think 80 is more likely to stay, but I think it. I think if anything, there's a question to be had of like, does LA want to keep like where does LA want to go after Braun retires in terms of do they want to rebuild? They typically don't want to rebuild, so I would assume they don't. But like, do they have the thought of like maybe it's best to trade AD, recoup assets, get some picks, get some young guys, and like move forward from there, or is it let's reload with a second star? Like that to me is the calculus that I'm interested in. Okay, so Charlie. All right, I see. Thank Charlie. Thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, do you think there could be a chance for us fans in China to get you in for an interview here in China? We don't have much Lakers interview. Lakers info, sorry. Yes. Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. I think you had emailed me about that a bit ago, so let's do it. Bloodhound says, Jovan, get Nightbot at least to ban certain words and behaviors as your channel gets bigger. It's a good call. I'm going to try and find out because I'm using StreamYard. So I think I got to figure out how to, because I can delete comment, I could put user in timeout, and I could ban user and delete their comments, but that's not, there's nowhere to make someone a moderator, at least through their super chats. Jay, Jovan, have you been the guest on any pods? Recently, I did Sean Davis's pod. I did a season preview, and then I did another one a couple weeks ago. I was doing Hoops Tonight with Jason Timpf regularly last year. We haven't done an episode yet this year. I did Anthony Irwin's show a couple times this season, or at least once, maybe twice. It's honestly like I've been so focused on this that I've kind of not been interested in doing other shows. I do believe in collaboration, and I think it's good to get out um, and do the cross promotion. But I've been doing this almost every day, so in addition to, and again, I think a lot of you might only know me through YouTube and the podcast, but like my full time official job is Lakers beat writer for The Athletic. So I first and foremost, my job is to write and report for The Athletic. So I've done a lot of athletic pods throughout the season, but that I kind of don't, because it's technically the company I work for. But yeah, I do want to start to do more pods again. I've just been very intentional with, like, I only have so much bandwidth, and I'm trying to focus it on building out the show. Justine Severo, Jovan, who's your next guest? I am working on that. So my next show is going to be solo, and then the one later in the week, we'll keep you guys updated on that. Carl, Jovan, any updates on Quincy's injury? No. Just I know he should be back relatively soon, but Dark Galaxy, have you met Cranges personally? I have not. L.A. Jovan, do you know Windy at all? Can you get on that, or is that ESPN talent only? I do know Windhorse. I worked with him. I was previously at ESPN as an editor for 2 years. I would love to have him on. I'm not quite sure about the restriction, but I would love to bring him on. Lakers in 7. What do you think of a starting lineup of D'Lo, Max, Dalton / Rui, Braun, AD? D'Lo already has great chemistry with all of them and can always get Max going. Or is that lineup too small? I actually like a D'Lo Max backcourt. I would assume, I think they want to keep Rui in there for size purposes and to protect LeBron in particular, in terms of like having to take on, like tonight, Rui guarded Ant, but he also guarded Julius Randle. So I think that's Rui's primary, not his primary function, but like one of his primary functions is being able to support LeBron and AD in a way that Dalton just can't. I don't. So I know some people have said replace Austin with D'Lo. I'm not there. I think D'Lo's been playing slightly better than Austin the last 2 games, but I think tonight you saw, like, I think a D'Lo Dalton backcourt is just too. There's not enough resistance there defensively. Now in the scenario, you're putting Max there, and then you're moving one of Dalton or Rui to the bench, as well as Austin. Like, I guess if you are going to start D'Lo, I'm more open to this version of having another better defender next to him in the backcourt. To, like, I think Max complements D'Lo well, but I'm not quite there yet. I still think it's probably going to be Austin, Dalton, Rui, LeBron, AD moving forward, but certainly something to monitor. Sean Parker, Jovan, are you and Mike Trudell friends? Yes, we are. I'm actually playing fantasy basketball with him. I just joined his league. Paul, when's the next Vando update? To be honest, I'm not quite sure, because the timelines have come and gone in terms of like when we're supposed to get one. So I would guess like maybe end of the week or like next week, but maybe once we get back to LA, but it keeps getting pushed back. L.A. Jovan, how contentious can editor-writer relationships be? They can be pretty contentious. I've never had that, thankfully. I've only had good experiences with my editors at The Athletic, and when I was an editor, my relationship with writers. I think being an editor gave me a unique. There are some writers who are high maintenance, and like that's not me at all. Because I've been in the editor, I've worn the editor hat before, so I understand that they're just trying to do the job to the best of their ability as well. So I think kind of having that experience has helped me keep good relationships with my editors, but certainly definitely have heard stories of it getting pretty contentious and and sometimes over small stuff like taking out a sentence, restructuring a sentence, like little stuff like that can set off certain people. So I am not, I mean, I'm not going to say I've never had an issue with like an edit. I've certainly had that at times, but no, nothing for me has ever been like, it's ever been really contentious with any of the editors I've dealt with personally. Harry Chinani, do players/coaches tell reporters how long they can speak for? No, it's PR controls that. Typically, after a loss, guys typically go shorter. So like JJ tonight went 6 minutes. He'll often go like 8 to 12. LeBron went about 3. Some nights he'll go 5 to 6. AD tends to talk a little bit longer. Tonight, I think he went 5. I would say the average night he's like 6 to 8. So you kind of get into like the rhythm of like how long a guy is going to speak for, but it fluctuates depending on mood, depending on result of the game. Twisted 9, is D'Lo being fined for not speaking with the media? No, but it could be trending there. It could be going in that direction. Sean Parker, Jovan, would you take Ham back? No, I think JJ is a better coach than Darvin. And part of it, it's tough. It's tough too because I also think the group had checked out on Darvin by the end of last year. So like, I don't think they could have brought Darvin back, but I think if there was a way to like mend fences and bring Darvin back, I think this group would probably not have as many wins, to be honest. All right. I've gone 27 minutes over, so I'm going to wrap here. But as a reminder, I will be back tomorrow with 10 storylines from the quarter point of the season, and specifically 10 storylines over the last like 10, 11 games. I'm going to be focusing a little bit more recent. As you guys saw, I did that episode with Trevor Lane where it's called State of the Lakers, 10 storylines through the first 10 games. This is the like I'm trying to do it in 10 game increments, the kind of like 10 primary storylines in each chunk of the season. So I will have that episode out most likely Pacific time in the afternoon, but maybe there's a chance I get it out earlier depending on how late I'm up tonight editing the audio version of this and writing. But be on the lookout for that tomorrow. Hope you guys enjoy that episode. And this was fun. I said I was only going to do an hour. We went an hour and a half. That's what we do. And yes, Jay says, yo, 10 storylines, LFG. I'm Mario, can you beat Sliwa one-on-one? I was kind of already asked this in the past. I will say yes. Sorry, Sliwa. You're my man. Sliwa's my guy. I got to have him on the show soon. Maybe that'll be my Thursday guest. Let me know if you guys want. I've done Sliwa show. That's another one. I've done Sliwa show twice this season. I've done it a lot in the past, but well, maybe that'll be my Thursday or Friday guest, depending on when I go. But yeah, I will be doing, so of course, post-game reactions after each game. I'll have a new episode tomorrow. I will do a Q&A either Thursday or Friday, depending on which day I do a guest. And yeah, so a lot more content coming the rest of this week. Thank you all so much for rocking with me for an hour and a half. Sorry for the spammers. Obviously out of my control, but I didn't even know it was happening for the first however many minutes, but tried to track it. It's got a lot going on. I got the screen here. I got the chat. I got the super chat. So I'm trying to balance it all, but tried to handle it in a timely manner, but I apologize. And Fang Charlie will be putting up a YouTube community. Yeah, I'll probably do a community note for a mailbag. Maybe I'll do a mailbag with my guest at the end of the week. But thank you all so much, Late Night Gang. I appreciate you all. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back in less than 24 hours with a new video with the 10 storylines through the quarter point of the season for the Lakers. Be on the lookout for that, and I will talk to you very soon.